Galaxy Empire proclaims war. Humanity hardly cares. The message came on a Tuesday. It arrived through every screen on Earth at exactly 12:47 p.m. Korean Standard Time. Televisions flickered. Phones buzzed. Computer monitors went dark for 3 seconds before displaying the face of something that was definitely not human. The creature had 6 eyes arranged in a circle around its head. Its skin was pale purple, and it wore golden armor that sparkled under strange lights. Behind it stood hundreds of soldiers in perfect formation. "People of Earth," the creature spoke in a deep voice that had been translated into every human language, "I am High Commander of the Empire. Your planet has been selected for conquest. You have exactly 1 rotation of your world to surrender. Refuse, and we will destroy everything you hold dear. This is not a request. This is your only warning." The message ended. Screens returned to normal. In Seoul, Admiral was eating his lunch when the message appeared on the small television in the corner of the military cafeteria. He looked up from his bowl of noodles, watched the alien deliver its speech, and then looked back down at his food. "The noodles are getting cold," he muttered to himself. Across the table, his assistant Bora stared at him with wide eyes. "Sir, did you just see that? Aliens just declared war on us." Slurped his noodles loudly. "Yes, I saw it." "And what do we do?" The Admiral thought for a moment. He had been in the military for 35 years. He had seen many things that were supposed to be impossible. He had survived 3 economic crashes, 2 global pandemics, and his daughter's teenage years. An alien empire did not impress him. "We finish lunch first," he said calmly. "Then we go back to work." At the Blue House, President was in the middle of a meeting about highway construction when her phone lit up with the alien broadcast. She watched it silently while her advisors panicked around her. "Madam President," shouted the Minister of Defense, "we need to act immediately. We need to contact other nations. We need to." President raised her hand. The room went quiet. "Has anyone confirmed this is real?" she asked. "The signal came from beyond our solar system," said a scientist who had rushed into the room. "It's definitely not from Earth." "Interesting." The president looked at her calendar. "I have a meeting with the Education Committee at 3. Can we handle this before then?" The scientist blinked. "Handle the alien invasion?" "Yes, I don't want to be late. You know how teachers get." Around the world, reactions varied. In some countries, people ran through the streets screaming. In others, governments declared states of emergency. Military bases went on high alert. Stock markets crashed for about 15 minutes before someone decided that alien invasions were probably good for weapons manufacturing, and then they went back up again. But in Korea, life continued mostly as normal. Office worker was on the subway when the announcement played. He looked up from his phone, watched the alien threaten humanity, and then went back to playing his mobile game. The person next to him did the same. Nobody screamed. Nobody ran. The train continued on schedule. "Excuse me," said a foreign tourist sitting nearby. He looked terrified. "Did everyone just see that? Why is no one reacting?" Shrugged, "We have work tomorrow." "But aliens are going to destroy the planet." "They said we have 24 hours, plenty of time." The tourist looked around desperately, hoping someone else would share his panic. Everyone on the train was either sleeping, reading, or staring at their phones. One grandmother was knitting. "You people are insane," the tourist whispered. Did not respond. He had just reached a new level in his game. At the Korean Space Defense Center, Commander received the news while reviewing maintenance reports. Her team gathered around her, waiting for orders. "So," said Lieutenant, "what's the plan?" Looked at the reports in her hands. One of their satellites needed new solar panels. 2 of their defense stations had outdated software. Their flagship, was due for cleaning next week. "We continue with regular operations," she said. Regular operations, repeated. Commander, an empire just declared war on us. Yes, I heard. They have ships, many ships. They've probably conquered hundreds of worlds. Set down her reports. She looked at her team, 12 men and women who had trained for years to protect their planet. They were good people, hard workers. They deserved honesty. Let me tell you something, she said. Humans have been fighting since we learned to pick up rocks. We fought animals. We fought nature. We fought each other. We survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, diseases, and 2 world wars. We invented nuclear weapons and pointed them at ourselves for 50 years just to see who would blink first. Nobody blinked. She walked to the window and looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, an alien fleet was preparing to attack. These aliens think they're scary because they conquered a few planets. They have no idea what we are. They have no idea what we've done to each other. They think one message will make us surrender, she laughed softly. They're about to learn a very important lesson. What lesson? Asked. Turned back to her team with a small smile. Humans don't surrender. We get annoyed. We complain about the inconvenience, and then we solve the problem so we can go back to our normal lives. That evening, President held a short press conference. She stood behind a podium with the Korean flag behind her, looking as calm as if she were announcing a holiday schedule. Citizens of Korea and the world, she began, I'm sure you've all seen the message from the Empire. They have given us 24 hours to surrender. I want to be clear about our response. She paused. The world held its breath. No. Reporters erupted with questions. Madam President, what about their military power? We've faced worse, she said simply. What about civilian safety? Stay inside if you're worried, or don't. Life continues. Do you have a message for the aliens? President thought for a moment. Then she smiled politely, the same smile she used when dealing with difficult politicians. Yes, don't forget that tomorrow is recycling day. Put your bins out by 7. The press conference ended. The world watched in confusion. The Empire, monitoring Earth's communications, tried to understand what had just happened. High Commander reviewed the recordings 3 times. He could not believe what he was seeing. No panic, no mass evacuations, no desperate pleas for mercy, just people going about their lives as if nothing had changed. Are they stupid? Asked his second-in-command. Do they not understand what's coming? I don't know, admitted. Perhaps they're in shock. Should we send another warning? The High Commander shook his head slowly. He had conquered 63 planets. He had seen species beg, fight, and flee, but he had never seen this. He had never seen a species simply not care. For the first time in his long career, High Commander felt something strange in his stomach. It wasn't fear exactly. It was more like the feeling of walking into a dark room and sensing that something was already there, watching, waiting. No more warnings, he said quietly. We proceed with the invasion, but tell the fleet to be careful. Careful against these primitives. Looked at the image of Earth floating on his screen. Such a small planet, such a young species, and yet something about them made his 6 eyes narrow with unease. Just be careful, he repeated. On Earth, humanity went asleep. Most people had work in the morning. Alien invasion or not, bills still needed to be paid. Galaxy Empire proclaims war. Humanity hardly cares. The fleet arrived at dawn. 300 ships emerged from beyond the moon, blocking out stars as they moved into position around Earth. They were massive, each one the size of a small city, covered in weapons and armor that had destroyed civilizations far older than humanity. High Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. Through the viewing window, Earth looked peaceful, blue oceans, green lands, white clouds drifting slowly. It looked like an easy target. Begin the approach, he ordered. Target their largest cities first. Let them see our power. The fleet moved forward. In Seoul, Commander received the alert at 5:47 a.m. She was already awake, drinking her morning coffee in the command center. The night crew looked tired but alert. 300 contacts confirmed, reported Lieutenant. They're moving toward Earth. Took another sip of coffee. It was good coffee. Her sister had sent it from last month. What's their ETA? She asked. Approximately 4 hours, until they reach optimal attack range. 4 hours, nodded. That's enough time for breakfast. Someone order food for everyone. We'll need our energy. Stared at her. Commander, shouldn't we scramble our pilots now? On empty stomachs. No, bad for morale. She set down her cup. But you're right, start the wake-up calls. I want everyone in position by 9. Tell them to eat well, it's going to be a long day. Across the planet, military stirred to life. Pilots climbed into cockpits. Ships launched from hidden bases. Defense satellites activated. But there was no panic in their movements, just quiet efficiency. Pilot, the same office worker who had been playing games on the subway yesterday, was actually a reservist. He had received his call at 6 a.m., eaten a quick breakfast with his mother, and arrived at the airbase by 7:30. I didn't know you were a pilot, said his commander. Part-time, explained, putting on his flight suit. I work in accounting normally. And you're not scared? Thought about it, number should I be? His commander laughed, I guess not. The Korean Air Force had exactly 47 space-capable fighters. They were old ships, most built 20 years ago when humanity first started exploring beyond their moon. Compared to the warships, they looked like toys. But looks could be deceiving. Listen up, said Wing Commander, addressing the pilots in the briefing room. She was a small woman with short hair and eyes that never seemed to blink. The enemy has 300 ships. We have 47. Those are bad numbers. Someone in the back laughed nervously. However, continued, we have something they don't have. We have absolutely nothing to lose. We've spent our entire history fighting things bigger than us. This is what we do. She pulled up a tactical map. Our job is simple. Hold them off until the ground defenses can charge. That takes about 6 hours. We need to survive for 6 hours. She looked at each pilot. Can you do that? The room was silent for a moment, then raised his hand. Can we go home after? He asked. I have a report due tomorrow. Smiled, it was a genuine smile. Yes, if you survive you can go home. Then I'll survive. The fleet continued its approach. High Commander watched Earth grow larger in the viewing window. He had expected missiles by now, nuclear weapons, desperate attacks from a panicking species. Instead, he saw nothing. Why aren't they fighting? He asked his science officer. Unknown, perhaps they're preparing a surrender. Or a trap. The science officer laughed. A trap? Commander, they're a young species with outdated technology. What could they possibly? The first missile hit their shields. It came from nowhere, or rather, it came from everywhere. Satellites that had been dormant for years suddenly activated, launching waves of projectiles at the fleet. Ground-based stations fired beams of concentrated energy at the ships above. The attack was coordinated, precise, and completely unexpected. Report, shouted. Shields holding, minor damage to the outer ships. Return fire, destroy those satellites. The ships unleashed their weapons. Purple energy bolts raced toward Earth, destroying satellites and stations in bright explosions. But for every one they destroyed, 2 more seemed to activate. Where are all these weapons coming from? The science officer asked, confusion clear in his voice. Understood now, he understood too late. Humanity had been preparing for war for a very long time, not against aliens, against themselves. Every nation had built weapons during their long history of conflict. Nuclear missiles, orbital platforms, secret bases. And when the aliens came, all those weapons suddenly had a new target. They were never panicking, realized. They were waiting. The second wave of attacks began. 47 Korean fighters emerged from the atmosphere, moving in perfect formation. They were joined by ships from other nations: American, Chinese, European, Russian. Hundreds of small fighters against hundreds of massive warships. "Launch interceptors," ordered, "destroy those insects." The fighters launched thousands of small drones designed to eliminate enemy craft. They were faster than human ships, more maneuverable, better armed. But humans were not fighting fairly. Pilot saw the drones coming. His targeting computer counted them, 247 heading directly at his squadron. "That's a lot," he said calmly into his radio. "Stay in formation," ordered. "Wait for my signal." The drones came closer, faster. Their weapons began to charge. Now, the Korean fighters scattered in all directions, moving in patterns that made no tactical sense. They flew toward each other, missing by centimeters. They dove toward the planet, then pulled up at the last moment. They did everything wrong. And the drones didn't know how to respond. Drones were programmed to fight predictable enemies. They expected formation flying. They expected logical tactics. They did not expect 47 pilots who flew like they were crazy. Ship spun between two drones, so close he could see the lights on their surfaces. He fired his weapons not at the drones but at the space around them, forcing them to change course. Then another pilot, Myra from the capital, shot them down while they were confused. "2 kills," Myra shouted. "Focus," commanded. "We have 245 more." On the Eternal Conquest, High Commander watched the battle with growing frustration. His drones, perfect machines of war, were being destroyed by ships that flew like drunken birds. "What kind of tactics is this?" he demanded. "None, sir," his tactical officer replied. "They have no tactics, they're just fighting. Fighting without tactics is suicide. And yet they're winning." It was true. The human fighters, despite being outnumbered and were tearing through the drone waves, they worked together without speaking, predicting each other's movements as if they could read minds. When one ship was in trouble, another would appear to help. When an opening appeared, 3 would attack at once. They fought like a species that had been fighting forever, because they had. The first warship fell 3 hours into the battle. It was a small cruiser, hit by a combined attack from 12 different nations: missiles from Australia, lasers from Japan, a ramming attack from a Brazilian pilot who ejected at the last moment. The ship broke apart in a beautiful explosion. Across the planet, people cheered, not because they were winning, the battle was far from over, but because they had drawn blood. They had proven that the enemy could be hurt. "Commander," reported to, "ground defenses are at 80% charge. 2 more hours." Good had not moved from her station. Her coffee was cold now, but she still held the cup. "Tell all units to hold, just hold." In the sky, the battle raged. Ships exploded. Lives ended, but humanity did not retreat. They had faced worse. They had faced themselves. And somehow that was scarier. High Commander watched his fleet take damage. 20 ships destroyed, 40 more damaged, and the primitives were still fighting. "Pull back to safe distance," he ordered quietly. "Sir." "Pull back, regroup, we need a new strategy." He looked at Earth, that small, stubborn planet that refused to die. "They're not what we expected. We need time to understand them." The fleet retreated. On Earth, Commander finally set down her cold coffee. She looked at her team, exhausted but alive. "They're falling back," reported. "I see it," allowed herself a small smile. "Good work, everyone." "Did we win?" "No, this was just round 1. She stood up, stretching her tired legs. "But we're still here, and that's something." Pilot landed his damaged fighter back at the base. His hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally wearing off. He had killed 11 drones. He had nearly died 4 times. and somehow he was still thinking about that report due tomorrow. "You did good," told him. Thanks removed his helmet. His hair was soaked with sweat. "What happens now?" "Now we fix our ships, we rest, we prepare for round 2. "And my report?" Laughed a real genuine laugh. "I'll give you an extension." Smiled. An extension? That was worth fighting for. Above the planet the fleet waited. They had come expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they had found something else entirely. They had found humanity. And humanity, it seemed, was not so easy to conquer after all. Galaxy Empire proclaims war. Humanity hardly cares. The Empire had made a critical mistake. They had studied Earth from far away. They had watched human broadcasts, analyzed human technology, and counted human weapons. But they had not understood humans. Not really. High Commander sat alone in his quarters reviewing the battle data. 23 ships lost, hundreds of drones destroyed, and Earth was still intact. How, he whispered to himself, how did primitives do this? A knock came at his door. "Enter." His science officer stepped in, holding a data tablet. "Commander, I have the analysis you requested. You're not going to like it." "Tell me." The science officer swallowed. "The humans. They're not what we thought. Their technology is outdated, yes. Their military is small, but they have something we didn't consider." "What?" "Experience." The officer pulled up a hologram. It showed human history, wars, battles, conflicts stretching back thousands of years. They have been fighting since they first walked upright. They fight over land, resources, ideas, even just for practice. They have never stopped. Stared at the hologram, so much violence, so much death, and they had done it all to themselves. "We are warriors," the science officer continued. "We conquered 63 planets, but those species had known peace. They had forgotten how to fight. Humans never forgot. They never could. Fighting is part of who they are." Back on Earth, humanity was not resting. They were adapting. Engineer worked in a small laboratory in. Before the invasion, she had been designing kitchen appliances. Now she was looking at a piece of drone that had crashed near her city. "Fascinating," she muttered, poking at the alien circuitry with a screwdriver. "Their power distribution is completely different from ours, but the basic principles are the same." Her assistant, young engineer, watched nervously. "Should we be touching that? It might be dangerous." "Everything is dangerous." Pulled out a small component and held it up to the light. "This is their energy core. It's efficient, maybe 10 times better than our best batteries. So we steal the design." Smiled. "Steal is such an ugly word. I prefer improve." Within 48 hours, and her team had reverse-engineered the power system. Within another 24 hours, they had built their own version. It was not as good as the original, but it was good enough. "Send the plans to every military base," ordered, "and to the civilian tech companies. Someone might have better ideas." This was happening everywhere. All over the planet, humans were taking pieces of fallen alien technology and figuring out how to use it. In Germany, engineers improved shield technology. In Brazil, scientists decoded alien communication frequencies. In Japan, a retired built a new type of weapon using energy cells and a car battery. Humanity was not just fighting the invasion, they were learning from it. Pilot was back in the sky on the 3rd day. His ship had been upgraded overnight, new power cells, improved targeting systems, and a fresh coat of paint because someone thought it was important. "How does it feel?" asked over the radio. Tested the controls. The ship responded faster now, smoother. "Like new, better than new." "Good, because they're coming back." The fleet emerged from behind the moon. This time they were more careful. Instead of charging forward, they held back, sending scout ships to test Earth's defenses. "They're being cautious," observed Commander from the ground. "Good, cautious enemies make mistakes." High Commander had changed his strategy. No more direct attacks. Instead, he would wear down the humans slowly, cut off their satellites, destroy their supply lines, force them to surrender through attrition. "Send the blockade ships," he ordered. "Nothing leaves or enters Earth's atmosphere. We will starve them into submission." The blockade began. Cruisers positioned themselves around Earth, creating a web that nothing could pass through. Human satellites were destroyed one by one. Communication lines were cut. The planet was isolated. On Earth, people noticed. Of course they noticed. The internet was slower. Satellite TV stopped working. GPS signals disappeared. And humanity responded the way it always responded to problems, with complaints and solutions. "This is ridiculous," muttered office worker, staring at her broken phone signal. "I can't even check my messages." Her shrugged. "Use the landline. My grandmother still has one." "A landline? What is this, the 1990s? It works, doesn't it?" Within days, humanity had rebuilt their communication networks. Old technologies were revived: radio signals, physical cables, even carrier pigeons in some areas. They had cut off the satellites, but they couldn't cut off human creativity. Meanwhile, the military was planning a counterattack. "We can't break the blockade with our current ships," admitted Admiral during an emergency meeting. "We need something bigger." "We don't have anything bigger," said the American general. "Then we build something bigger." The project was called Unity. It was the largest cooperation in human history. Every nation contributed resources, scientists, and workers. Factories that had been making cars now made ship parts. Universities became research centers. Ordinary people donated materials, time, and ideas. "My grandmother wants to help," said the young engineer. "She knits. She's asking if we need any knitted things." "Thought about it. Actually, thermal insulation. We need better thermal insulation for the reactor. Can she knit with heat-resistant fiber?" "I'll ask." 3 weeks later, the reactor was wrapped in hand-knitted thermal blankets made by grandmothers from across Korea. It worked better than anything the engineers had designed. They watched Earth carefully. Their sensors showed industrial activity increasing rather than decreasing. Ships were being built. Weapons were being manufactured. The blockade was supposed to weaken humanity, but instead, it seemed to be making them stronger. "I don't understand," said Second in Command. "We cut off their resources. How are they producing more?" "They're using what they have," replied. "They're recycling, adapting, building new things from old parts." "But that's not how conquered species behave." Looked at Earth through the viewing window. The planet looked the same as always, peaceful, blue, beautiful. But he knew now that appearance was deceiving. "They're not conquered yet," he said quietly, "and I'm beginning to wonder if they ever will be." On Earth, the unity was taking shape. It was not one ship, but thousands of small ships designed to work together as a single unit. Each nation contributed their best technology: Korean shields, American weapons, Chinese engines, European computers, Russian armor. It was ugly, it was impractical, it should not have worked. But it did. Pilot was selected to lead one of the attack squadrons. He accepted the position calmly, as if he had been expecting it. "Why you?" asked Myra, his fellow pilot. "I have good instincts," he said simply. "That's not a real answer." Smiled. "I survived 3 weeks of combat while worrying about office work. I think I can handle anything." The counterattack was scheduled for the next full moon, not for any tactical reason, just because Commander liked the symbolism. "Humans have always looked at the moon," she explained to her team. "We dreamed about it for thousands of years before we finally went there. Now we'll use it to launch our counterattack. It feels right." "That's very poetic," said. "War is poetry," replied, "just with more explosions." The night before the attack, called his mother. The lines were bad, Everything was routed through old cables now, but he could hear her voice. "Are you eating well?" she asked. "Yes, Mom." "Are you sleeping enough?" "Mostly." "Good." A pause. "I'm proud of you." Didn't know what to say. He had never been good with emotions. "Thanks, Mom." "Come home safe." "I'll try." He hung up and looked out the window at the moon. Tomorrow he would fight again. Tomorrow he might die. But tonight he was just a son talking to his mother. Humanity, he thought, we're strange creatures. We fight, we kill, we destroy. But we also love, we hope, we dream. Maybe that was why they couldn't be conquered. Because to conquer humans, you had to destroy everything that made them human, and some things could not be destroyed. The next morning, the Unity fleet launched. Thousands of ships rose from Earth's surface, breaking through the atmosphere in perfect coordination. They moved like a swarm of angry bees, chaotic but unified. High Commander saw them coming and felt something he had not felt in centuries. "Fear." "Battle stations," he ordered. "All ships prepare for combat." The second battle had begun, and this time humanity was not just defending. They were attacking. Galaxy Empire proclaims war. Humanity hardly cares. The battle above Earth was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. The Unity fleet crashed into the blockade with no hesitation. Thousands of small ships, each one carrying the hopes of a planet, attacked warships 100 times their size. High Commander commanded from the eternal conquest, directing his fleet with precision. He had fought for 300 years. He had never lost a war. But he had never fought humans before. "Focus fire on the lead ships," he ordered. "Break their formation." Purple energy beams lanced through space, destroying human fighters in bright explosions. But for every ship that fell, 10 more took its place. They came from everywhere, from Earth's surface, from hidden bases on the moon, from satellites that had been secretly converted into weapons platforms. "How many ships do they have?" demanded. "Unknown, sir. They keep launching more." "That's impossible. They shouldn't have the resources." But impossibility meant nothing to humans. They had built ships from garbage. They had converted civilian vessels into warships. They had launched rockets held together with tape and hope, and somehow it was working. Pilot flew through the chaos, his fingers dancing across his controls. His ship was fast, faster than before, thanks to modifications. He dodged between enemy fire looking for weaknesses. "Squadron 3, follow me," he called through the radio. "I see an opening." 12 ships formed up behind him. They trusted him, these pilots from different nations who had never met before the war. They trusted him because he was calm, because he never panicked, because he flew like he had nothing to fear. In truth, was terrified. But he had learned something important in his years of office work. Fear didn't matter. Results mattered. So he pushed his fear aside and focused on what needed to be done. "Target the cruiser's engines," he ordered, "on my signal." The cruiser was massive, bristling with weapons. Its shields glowed purple, deflecting smaller attacks, but shields had limits. Now, 13 ships fired at once, all targeting the same spot. The concentrated attack overloaded the shield generator, creating a gap for just a few seconds. That was enough. A missile, launched by pilot Myra from 30 kilometers away, slipped through the gap and hit the engine core. The cruiser shuddered, then exploded in a ball of fire. "Kill confirmed," shouted someone on the radio. "Don't celebrate yet," replied. "There are 200 more." On the ground, General Menu coordinated the counterattack from a bunker beneath Seoul. He was an old soldier, retired for 5 years before the invasion dragged him back to duty. His hair was gray, his hands slightly shaky, but his mind was sharp as ever. "Squadron 7, move to Sector 4. Squadron 9, provide cover." "Yes, sir." "And someone get me more coffee. This is going to be a long day." His staff rushed to obey. They had learned quickly that General Menu was not a man who raised his voice. He didn't need to. His quiet orders carried more weight than any shout. "General," said his aide, a young woman named, "the enemy flagship is holding back. They're letting their smaller ships take the losses." "Smart," Menu studied the tactical map, "is conserving his best assets. He expects us to tire ourselves out." "Will we?" "No," the general smiled slightly. "Because we're not trying to win today, we're trying to survive. There's a difference." In space, the battle continued. Ships exploded. Lives ended. But humanity kept fighting, not because they were winning, but because giving up was not in their nature. High Commander watched his fleet struggle. His tactics were perfect. His weapons were superior. And yet the primitives kept coming. "They should have broken by now," he muttered. "Every other species broke." "Perhaps," said his science officer carefully, "we should consider a different approach." "What approach?" "Negotiation." Turned sharply, "Negotiation with them. They're not what we expected. They're not what anyone expected. Perhaps there's value in understanding them rather than destroying them." It was the first time anyone had suggested peace. The Empire did not negotiate. They conquered. That was their way. But watching the battle, watching humans throw themselves into certain death with smiles on their faces, wondered if their way was the only way. Before he could respond, alarms filled the bridge. "Commander, enemy ships have broken through the perimeter. They're heading for the flagship." Looked at the tactical display. A small group of human fighters had slipped past the outer defenses. They were heading straight for the eternal conquest. "Launch interceptors," he ordered. "All batteries target those ships." But the human ships were moving strangely. They weren't flying in formation. They weren't following any pattern. They were just moving, randomly, unpredictably. "I can't get a targeting solution," reported the weapons officer. "They keep changing direction." "Then fire everywhere. Create a wall of energy they can't pass." The flagship's weapons lit up, creating a barrier of purple fire. No sane pilot would fly through that. No trained soldier would try. Flew through it anyway. His ship shook violently as energy bolts passed inches from his hull. His shields flickered, failed, came back online. Warning lights covered his dashboard. His computer screamed at him to retreat. He ignored it all. "I see the bridge," he reported, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Targeting now." "Pull back," shouted, "you'll be killed." "Maybe." He locked onto the flagship's command center. "But I'll take them with me." At that moment, watching through the viewing window and saw each other. Just for a second. Two enemies, separated by shields and armor, making eye contact across the void of space. Saw no fear in the human's eyes. No desperation, just calm determination. And in that moment, he understood. Humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting because fighting was what they did. They would keep fighting until they were all dead, and even then, their ghosts would probably find a way to continue. You could not defeat a species like that. You could only destroy them or join them. "All ships cease fire," ordered quietly. The bridge went silent. "Commander," asked his second-in-command. "Cease fire, full retreat, now." No one moved. They were too shocked. "Now," repeated, and this time his voice carried the authority of 300 years of command. The fleet stopped firing. Slowly, carefully, they began to withdraw. In his cockpit, watched the enemy retreat with confusion. His finger was still on the trigger. One shot and he could destroy the enemy commander. One shot and the war might end. But he didn't fire. Something in him, something old and human and complicated, recognized that this moment meant something. The enemy was retreating. The war was pausing. And sometimes pausing was more important than winning. "They're falling back," he reported. "Confirmed," said her voice full of disbelief. "All ships are withdrawing." Silence fell across the human fleet. For a long moment, no one knew what to say. Then someone started laughing. It was a tired, confused, hysterical laugh, and it spread. Pilot after pilot, ship after ship, the laughter echoed through the communication channels. They had done it. They had pushed back an empire. On the ground, General Menu received the news with a simple nod. Good. Now we prepare for the next round. Do you think there will be a next round? Asked. I don't know. Menu looked at the tactical display, watching the enemy ships fade into the distance. But I know humans will be ready. Commander stood in the command center, watching the same retreat. She had not slept in 2 days. She had watched hundreds of her people die. But now, watching the enemy withdraw, she felt something she hadn't felt since the war began. Hoping. Send a message to all units, she said. Stand down from combat positions, begin recovery operations, and tell everyone, she paused, searching for the right words, tell everyone I'm proud of them. Above Earth, the fleet gathered beyond the moon. High Commander stood alone on his bridge, thinking about what he had seen. A species that fought without tactics, a species that laughed in the face of death, a species that turned garbage into weapons and attacked an empire with retired grandmothers and office workers. They were insane, they were brilliant, they were terrifying. And they were still alive. Send a message to the Emperor, ordered. Tell him we need to talk about these humans, about what they are. His second-in-command hesitated. What should I say they are? Looked at Earth, that small blue planet that refused to die. Tell him they're survivors, tell him they're fighters, and tell him, he paused, tell him I don't think we can beat them, not like this, not ever. The message was sent, and across the galaxy, for the first time in its long history, the Empire considered the possibility of peace. All because of one stubborn species that simply refused to care about the odds. Galaxy Empire proclaims war. Humanity hardly cares. The Emperor arrived 3 months after the second battle. His ship was enormous, larger than anything humanity had ever seen. It emerged from beyond Mars, moving slowly toward Earth with an escort of 1,000 vessels. But the weapons were silent. The shields were down, and at the front of the fleet, a single white flag flew in the vacuum of space. High Commander had delivered his message to Emperor personally. He had described the battles, the losses, and the strange species that had caused them. He had shown recordings of humans laughing during combat, of grandmothers knitting reactor insulation, of an office worker who flew through a wall of fire to make eye contact with an enemy commander. Emperor had listened in silence. Then he had done something no emperor had done in 2,000 years. He had decided to negotiate. On Earth, the news of the approaching fleet caused some panic, but not much. People had learned that panicking didn't help. Instead, they watched the sky and waited. They're flying a white flag, observed Commander. In our culture, that means surrender or peace talks. How do they know about our culture? Asked. They've been watching our broadcasts for months. They probably know more about us than we know about them. Smiled slightly. I hope they enjoyed our television dramas. President prepared for the most important meeting in human history. She chose a simple conference room in Seoul, nothing fancy, nothing intimidating. Just chairs, a table, and a window overlooking the city. Shouldn't we do this somewhere more impressive? Asked her advisor. No, arranged papers on the table. We won by being ourselves. We'll negotiate the same way. Captain was selected to lead the honor guard that would greet the Emperor. She was young, only 32 years old, but she had commanded a ship during both battles and earned respect from humans and alike. What should I say to him? She asked Admiral. Whatever feels right, the old Admiral shrugged. You fought their warriors, now you get to meet their leader, just be honest. And if he tries anything? Smiled. Then we fight again, but I don't think he will. He didn't travel all this way to start another war. He came because he's curious about us, about what we are. Emperor stepped onto Earth's surface on a bright Tuesday morning. His feet touched Korean soil at exactly 9:15 a.m. The time had been arranged precisely because someone remembered that Tuesday was recycling day, and they didn't want to interrupt the garbage collection schedule. The Emperor was tall, nearly 3 meters high, with pale blue skin and golden eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore simple robes instead of armor, and he carried no weapons. Behind him, High Commander followed quietly. He had insisted on coming, wanting to see for himself the species that had taught him the meaning of fear. Captain stood at attention as they approached. Her honor guard, 12 soldiers from 12 different nations, stood beside her. "Emperor," she said calmly, "welcome to Earth. I hope your journey was comfortable." The Emperor studied her for a long moment. This small human, barely half his size, speaking to him as if he were a visiting neighbor rather than the ruler of 1,000 worlds. "Your planet is beautiful," he said finally. "I understand now why you fought so hard to protect it." "Thank you," gestured toward the building behind her. "President is waiting inside. She's prepared tea. I hope that's acceptable." T looked at confused. "A human drink," explained. "They offer it as a sign of hospitality." "Ah," the Emperor nodded slowly. "Then I accept." The negotiations lasted 3 days. They were not like any negotiations that had ever participated in. President did not demand territory or revenge. She did not threaten or manipulate. She simply sat across from the Emperor and talked. She talked about Earth, about human history, about the wars they had fought against each other for thousands of years, about the art and music and literature those wars had produced, about the way humans loved and hated and hoped and feared. "We are not a peaceful species," she admitted. "We have killed billions of our own kind over petty disagreements. We have destroyed our own planet's environment through greed and carelessness. We are foolish, violent, and short-sighted." Emperor listened, trying to understand. "Then why do you continue? Why don't you destroy yourselves completely?" "Because we're also stubborn," said with a small smile. "We refuse to give up. Even when everything is hopeless, we find a reason to keep going. Our children, our loved ones, our dreams. Something always keeps us moving forward." On the second day, the Emperor walked through Seoul with Only and Captain as escorts. He saw ordinary humans living ordinary lives, workers rushing to offices, children playing in parks, old people sitting on benches, watching the sky. "They don't seem afraid of me," observed. "They're not," replied. "You're just another visitor to them, a strange-looking one but still a visitor." "After I declared war on their world." "We've had worse declarations," shrugged. "We had 2 world wars in the last century. We nearly destroyed ourselves with nuclear weapons. An alien empire. That's just one more problem to solve." Stopped walking. He stood in the middle of a busy street, watching humans flow around him like water around a stone. They glanced at him curiously, maybe took a photo with their phones, then continued on their way. "They really don't care," he whispered. "They care about what matters to them," corrected. "Their families, their work, their lives, everything else is secondary." The Emperor was silent for a long time. Then very quietly he laughed. It was a strange sound, rarely laughed, but it was genuine. He laughed because he finally understood. He had conquered 63 planets. He had crushed entire civilizations. And here on this small world, ordinary people walked past him as if he were nothing special. It was humbling, and somehow it was also wonderful. On the 3rd day, Emperor signed a peace treaty. It was a simple document. The Empire recognized Earth's independence. Trade routes would be established. Cultural exchanges would begin. And if anyone threatened humanity in the future, the Empire would stand with them as allies. "You could have demanded more," observed after the signing. "More territory, more power," shook his head. No, I came here expecting to negotiate with a conquered species. Instead, I found something else. Something my empire has lost. What's that? Spirit, passion, the will to fight not because you must, but because you choose to. The emperor looked out the window at the city below. My people have forgotten what that feels like. We've been conquerors for so long that we've forgotten how to be alive. He turned back to, I think there's much we can learn from each other. Your species may be young and primitive by our standards, but you have something we need, something the entire galaxy needs. What's that? Smiled, an expression that looked strange on his alien face, but was genuine nonetheless. Hope. That evening there was a celebration. Humans and mixed together for the first time, sharing food and drinks and stories. The cultural differences were vast, but somehow connections formed. Pilot found himself talking to High Commander near the refreshment table. You're the one who flew at my ship, said. Yes, took a bite of food. Good dumplings here. I thought you were insane. I probably was, shrugged, but it worked. Studied the human carefully. You weren't afraid. I was terrified. I'm always terrified, smiled. But fear doesn't stop us, it just makes us more creative. Engineer showed a group of scientists her improved power cells. They were amazed that she had reverse-engineered their technology so quickly. We had good motivation, she explained. Your ships were trying to kill us. This design is actually better than our original, one scientist admitted. How did you improve it? My grandmother helped. She's very good at finding efficient solutions. The scientist looked confused. Your grandmother is an engineer. No, she knits. General Minu and Captain stood on a balcony, watching the celebration below. The old soldier had a glass of wine in his hand, his first drink in months. We did it, said quietly. We survived, Minu corrected. That's not quite the same thing. It feels like winning. Maybe, Minu looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there 1,000 ships waited peacefully. Or maybe this is just the beginning. The galaxy knows about us now. Other empires will come. Other challenges will appear. And we'll face them. Yes, Minu raised his glass, because that's what we do. Commander joined them on the balcony. She looked tired but satisfied. The Emperor is leaving tomorrow, she reported. He wants to return to his and share what he's learned. What do you think he learned? Asked. Thought about it. That size and power aren't everything. That a species that fights itself for 10,000 years might be the most dangerous thing in the universe. That humans are crazy, beautiful, terrifying, and worth knowing. That's a lot to learn in 3 days. He's a quick learner. The next morning, Emperor prepared to depart. He stood before President one last time, his 1,000 ships waiting silently in orbit. Thank you for your hospitality, he said formally. Thank you for your understanding, replied. Hesitated. There was something else he wanted to say, but he wasn't sure how to express it. Your species, when we first came here we called you primitives, insects. We thought conquering you would be simple. He paused. We were wrong, not just about your strength, but about what strength means. What does it mean? I don't know anymore, but I think it has something to do with caring about things that matter and not caring about things that don't. He looked at the sky, at his waiting fleet. An empire declared war on your world and your people continued with their daily lives. They went to work. They raised their families. They put out their recycling. Smiled, we have our priorities. Yes, and perhaps that's the most powerful thing of all. The Emperor departed. His fleet vanished into the stars, leaving Earth alone once more. And on that small blue planet, humanity went back to normal. The war became history. The invasion became a story told to children. Life continued as it always did, as it always would. Some things changed, of course. Trade routes opened. Alien tourists visited. Human ships began exploring the galaxy. but the essential nature of humanity remained the same. They worked, they loved, they fought, they dreamed. And when the next crisis came, and there would always be a next crisis, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. With complaints, with creativity, with absolute refusal to give up. Because that was who they were. That was who they would always be. Humanity. Strange, stubborn, wonderful humanity. The galaxy had finally met them, and the galaxy would never be the same.